On today's episode, I'll give Connor Bedard a grade for his sophomore season, and we'll also recap the Ice Hogs Game 1 win over the Wolves.
You're Locked On Blackhawks, your daily podcast on the Chicago Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, Blackhawks fans? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jack Bushman. Quick reminder off the jump to please go and hit that like button. Hop in the comment section below. Let me know what grade you would give Connor Bedard for his performance this season. And also make sure that you're subscribed to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube, all of which is 100% free, will not cost you anything, and helps me out in a massive way in growing my platform. But happy Friday, everyone. Thank you all again for joining me on another episode of Locked On Blackhawks, your one-stop shop for all things Chicago Blackhawks. The fun of the offseason truly begins here today, Blackhawks fans, as I'll begin my Chicago Blackhawks season recaps here today with none other than the 2023 number 1 overall pick, Connor Bedard. And for my season recaps, for those of you who haven't been along for the ride these last couple of years when I've done these, I'll go through each and every key member of the Chicago Blackhawks. We'll break down their statistics, their strengths, their weaknesses, what they need to work on this offseason. And then at the end, I will put that all together and give them one final grade for their performance this season. Again, let me know in the comment section what grade you would give Connor Bedard for his sophomore season, and also let me know which member of the Blackhawks you want to see me cover next for my season recap. Should it be Alex Vlasic, Ryan Donato, Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi? Make sure to give me your 2 cents down below in the comment section. But for Connor Bedard, obviously it was his sophomore season in the NHL. Before I talk about his strengths, weaknesses, what I think Bedsy needs to improve on here this summer, let's start with his statistics. Bedard wound up playing in all 82 games for the Blackhawks this year after missing 14 games during his rookie season after suffering a broken jaw against the New Jersey Devils. Not only was it awesome and much needed to see Connor Bedard stay healthy for the entire year, but I think it was also big to give him the experience of playing that full 82 game season. And I think that's going to be a big part for a lot of these Blackhawks youngsters these next few years, is that transition to a full 82 game schedule where you're going day in and day out for 6 straight months. It's a big transition for a lot of these kids. And for Bedard to get that experience early on, to play the full 82, definitely think that's going to be beneficial for him moving forward. And in the 82 games that he played this year, we saw Bedard tally 23 goals, 44 assists for 67 points. First, starting with the goal scoring category, Bedard did have 22 goals in 68 games as a rookie en route to the Calder Trophy. So for him to only have 23 in 82 games this year, definitely a little bit disappointing. I imagined he was going to be a shoo-in for 25 goals, probably even hit the 30-goal plateau for the first time this season. That was at least kind of my expectations, considering, Teuvo Teravainen, Tyler Bertuzzi were brought in. Those are definitely some better additions to this top 6 than what Bedard was working with during his freshman season. But I think there's a lot that goes into Bedard also not maybe taking the leap that we wanted to see in the goal scoring column. Obviously, the Blackhawks offense under Luke Richardson for those first couple months of the year was absolutely putrid. There was no upside, no pace. They were like a purely defensive-minded team. And then obviously Anders Sorensen comes in as the interim head coach. It's a tough kind of thing that the whole Blackhawks team has to work with. And under both coaches, Connor Bedard did not have a consistent running mate all year long. I mean, the top line was being tinkered with so often, and I don't think it did Connor Bedard any favors. And while the Blackhawks certainly had more capable top 6 pieces this year, Bedard never found that consistent running mate this season like he did the year prior with Philip Kurashev. And I think the way that Philip Kurashev went about his business, while it was, going to be hard for him to replicate this year, and that wound up being the case, he played a transition style that I think meshed really well with Connor Bedard, and Connor just didn't really have that guy all season long. He didn't play too much with Ryan Donato until late. He didn't really play with Teuvo Teravainen at all. And Tyler Bertuzzi, who is the guy they brought in, you would have thought to be his winger that would be crashing the net all the time. They didn't play all that frequently with one another. And again, Bertuzzi just doesn't really play a transition style like Philip Kurashev does. So I think all of those things led to not only the goal scoring numbers maybe not being what we wanted to see out of Bedard this year, but the rest of his offensive totals as a whole. I think there's a lot that goes into it. And again, not to get ahead of myself here, but for the kid to still put up 67 points and be the leading point scorer for this Blackhawks team with all that he had to deal with, no consistent running mate, I think that's still pretty impressive in and alone of itself. But moving next to the assist category, we saw Bedard tally 39 assists in 68 games during a rookie. So 44 in 82 games his next year. Again, probably not the development or the leap that we wanted to see in that category. But again, I think there were a lot of things that go into it. The Blackhawks offense as a whole was absolutely putrid until they finally got some kids who can play with pace on the roster and in the forward group a little bit later there in the season. And I think with the way that Bedard goes about his business, when you watch him play, I think there's the understanding that when there are better pieces here, how he goes about his business is going to shine even more with the creativity and the hockey IQ that he plays with. And again, for him to still put up 67 points in 82 games, while it would have been awesome to see him reach 70, these are still pretty darn good numbers for a kid who didn't have a lot to work with. And again, Ryan Donato had an outlier type of season. He still didn't put up more points than Connor Bedard. Teuvo Teravainen didn't have more points than Connor Bedard did. Bedsy, at the end of the day, was still the most productive player on this team at 19 years of age, and had a lot of things to battle with during the course of the season as well. But there are some things he has to work on moving forward, I think, to take that next step, and I'll touch on that here in just a second. But some other stats I wanted to go through for Bedard: minus 37 plus minus rating, was minus 44 as a rookie in the NHL. Do I think this number truly depicts Connor Bedard's impact on the Blackhawks, and is he that big of a defensive liability? No, I don't think so. I think that number is that bad because of how often Connor Bedard is playing on one of the worst teams in hockey that has one of the worst goal differentials in hockey. With that being said, though, when I talked and gave out my Blackhawks end of the season awards last weekend, Ilya Mikheyev was a +4 on the Blackhawks. So yes, he was the outlier of the team, but it is possible to still have a decent plus-minus rating on this Blackhawks squad. And I think this goes to show that Connor Bedard still definitely has room to grow on the defensive side of the game, especially if he wants to be a legitimate center iceman. Now, because we have players like Oliver Moore, and I think Ryan Green could be a good defensive-minded center, maybe Sasha Boisvert in the future as well. Frank Nazar plays a strong two-way game. We're never truly going to ask Connor Bedard to be the shutdown center here of the Blackhawks, but he does have to be a little bit more reliable and responsible on the defensive side of things. And compared to his rookie year, I thought he did take a semi-noticeable leap in that department in terms of his engagement, his physical activity, winning board battles. I thought that was super prevalent late in the year. Bedard got a lot more comfortable along the boards. So the cycles started to become a little bit more apparent in the offensive zone. And I think all of those things and becoming just a little bit more of a rugged and tougher player to play against, which again is never going to be Bedard's bread and butter as a 5'9", 5'10" offensive-minded player, but he's got to be a little bit more serviceable in that department and continue to take strides as he gets older and gets stronger. Another interesting stat for Bedard this year in terms of penalty minutes: he only had 28 penalty minutes in 68 games as a rookie. He had 70 in 82 games this year, and I believe part of that was a game misconduct that he got, and there were some frustration penalties from Bedard. And I think he was frustrated rightfully because the officials seemed to be against him night in and night out. And I really mean that unbiasedly. Like, if you watch this Blackhawks team, the officials were anti-Bedard basically every night. So I understand his frustration, but at the end of the day, if you are not going to be the strongest defensive player, which is the expectation for Bedard, you can't be taking that many penalties. At the same point in time, I like to see the engagement. I like to see that he cares. I like to see that he's battling out there at the very least, but is something he's going to have to clean up in his third year in the NHL. Now, looking at the power play versus even strength splits on the season, this is something that really stood out to me. Bedard only had 4 power play goals, in 68 games as a rookie. He did ramp that number up this year and had 11, which I absolutely love to see. It was one of my critiques on Bedard going into his sophomore year is he has the skill set. We got to find ways to have him be more dominant on the man advantage. And I do think that ties into a total team thing. It's not just, Bedard, you need to be better on the man advantage. No, it's establishing more weapons, having better puck movement as a unit, because all of that is going to lead to more opportunities, more open opportunities for Connor Bedard. I do think him taking over the power play, though, we saw that be a little bit more evident in just the overall confidence that he played with, and that led to him having 7 more power play goals in his second year than he did in his first, and that was definitely the transition that I wanted to see in that department. However, it came at the cost of scoring at 5-on-5. After 18 of his 22 goals as a rookie were scored at even strength, Bedard only had 12 even strength goals in 82 games, and that's definitely a tough pill to swallow. And I think some of his weaknesses that I'll touch on here in just a moment definitely tie into that. And I do think the lack of having a good running mate and a consistent top line definitely hurt this number as well. But Bedard, at the same time, needs to be more effective in both the goal scoring category and the playmaking category at 5-on-5. But again, the way he goes about his business when the Blackhawks get better help, I don't have any concerns that those numbers are going to take that next step. Getting into the shooting numbers for Connor Bedard, he took 195 shots on goal this year in 82 games. Compared to last year, he had 206 in 68 games. So definitely want to see Bedard calling his own number a little bit more frequently. He did shoot 11.8% this year, which was a nice step in the right direction after shooting 10.7% as a rookie. And something I talked about, and something I've even talked about this year as the shooting percentage hasn't necessarily been, well, it's still been in the double digits, and anything in double digits is good. I believe Connor Bedard has the ability to be a 13-14% shooter consistently with the release that he has. And we haven't even seen him sniff that type of number yet. So while the goal scoring hasn't been there, there's more that ties into it. Again, I'll get there in just a second. But again, part of it is Connor Bedard just trusting his own abilities, calling his own number. And when it's a 3-on-2 or a 2-on-1, you're the most talented player on this gosh darn team. You got to be shooting the biscuit a little bit more frequently. Another area where Bedard really struggled again this season was at the faceoff dot. After winning 38.9% of his faceoffs as a rookie, one of the worst, if not the worst in the NHL, he was actually even worse this year, winning just 38.3% of his draws. However, I should definitely put in that October, November, he was putrid at the dot, winning like 24% of his draws at that point. In the final couple of months, he was up in the 40s. His numbers were just so bad early on, it was hard to kind of raise that baseline. But there definitely was a progression that we saw out of Bedard as the season went by in the faceoff dot. But this year, he's got to hit 40%, right? What we saw in the second half of the season, that has to translate over right from the opening faceoff in 25-26. If you want to play the center position, Connor, and it's not like there's a huge rush on this, but it's about that time where you start showing us you're having that progression at the faceoff dot. I think it's really key that we see that out of Bedard in his junior season. In terms of time on ice, had a greater opportunity for the Blackhawks this year, although not by much. He averaged 19 minutes and 47 seconds as a rookie, 20 minutes and 17 seconds as a sophomore. Top line center gets the lion's share of opportunities. No surprise there. Another stat that jumped out to me with Bedard, he had 57 giveaways in 68 games as a rookie, 90 giveaways in 82 games this year. And I think that's a symptom of him, again, trying to do a little bit much at times, trying to go one-on-one and make the fancy play. And I know there are times where he has to try that when the Blackhawks are down by a couple of goals. Nothing is going right for them offensively, but there's a time and a place for it. And I think Bedard's decision-making on when to go about those things definitely needs some work as well, and just making the simplified play and making life a little bit easier on himself. 90 giveaways in 82 games. I didn't check the league leaders, but definitely has to be among them. And then getting into Bedard's analytics, the last numbers that I'll look at here for Bedsy, had a 43.9 Corsi for percentage at even strength on the season. Pretty close to what he had as a rookie, was 43.5. In terms of his goals for to goals against at even strength, he was on the ice for 60 goals for to 91 goals against. Blackhawks netminders had an 88.6 on ice save percentage when Bedard was out there, compared to his rookie year on the ice for 47 goals for to 83 against. So was definitely a more effective offensive player this year at even strength, despite the numbers maybe not taking the leap that we wanted to see. And then defensively, also in bigger workload, 82 games this year compared to 68 games the year prior, to only be on the ice for 91 goals, again, with the amount of opportunities that he gets compared to 83 and 68 games the year prior. I think also goes to show that Bedard, while it wasn't a massive difference, he did incrementally get a little bit better on the defensive side of things. But as far as Bedard's strengths and weaknesses, before I give him one final grade here, with his strengths, very clear the creativity is otherworldly. There are very few players in this game who think the way Connor Bedard thinks, who sees the progression of plays before they even happen. His recognition is really good in the offensive zone and on the power play. It took that next step, and because of that creativity and the unique skills that he has, it's going to be fun to watch him put it all together when this team gets a lot better. Transition play still remains probably where Bedard is the most dangerous, even though we didn't see it as frequently this year as I think we did during his rookie season. He was among the league leaders in high danger chances and scoring chances off of the rush. That really feels like his bread and butter, and I think the Blackhawks need to recognize that. They need to get him someone with pace that can play the wing along with him and be effective in transition, because when Connor Bedard has some speed going and he's going downhill and he's got someone with him, you know, even if it's just a 2-on-2 rush, he knows how to get himself open. He knows how to find his teammate open. It's just about putting him in those spots a little bit more frequently to have success. I also referenced starting to take over the power play. I think that's where you want to see high-level players shine, is when you have an advantage with an extra man out there, and we saw Connor Bedard take advantage of that this season. And I still think his finishing ability is one of his strengths as well. The amount of torque that he gets, how he can shoot the puck from any angle, and he's not afraid to. I think he just needs to trust upon himself a little bit more, because with the way he shoots the puck, he's going to be a 30-goal scorer in this league, but there are some things that he needs to work on in order for that to happen. With his shot in particular, something I've talked about a few times, Blackhawks fans, what his weaknesses are and what he needs to work on this summer. The shot power is awesome. He needs to get it off a little bit more frequently. He needs to trust upon himself. And I think that decision-making is certainly something he needs to work on when he has those one-on-ones and he tries to get a little bit too fancy and tries to make those moves to beat NHL defenders. Without having superb speed, Connor, it's just going to be really hard for you to do that in a grown man's league as an undersized type of player. But for his shot in particular, he needs to develop something other than a glove-high roof bomb, man. That's Connor Bedard's bread and butter, and I feel like goaltenders are guessing that's where he's going all the time. And something Patrick Kane talked about, and I think it was, might have been Jack Eichel or Johnny Hockey who referenced this, but when Patrick Kane started shooting low a little bit more frequently, that's when in his career we saw those goal-scoring numbers start to take a rise. And that's not to say that's exactly what will happen with Connor Bedard, but he's got to develop different types of shots. It just can't be glove high with power all the time. Go 5-hole, mix in a low glove, go top shelf blocker. I mean, truly, Blackhawks fans, how many goals of Connor Bedard's 55 that he scored in his NHL career, how many have been blocker high? I really can't name all that many. He's got to be more diverse with his shots and keep goaltenders on their toes, keep them guessing, because right now, I think it's too easy for them. They know this kid's going glove high. So many of his goals in his first 2 years have been scored that way, and he definitely needs to develop a little bit different of a shot, or something that's at least away from his standard glove high regiment. Also, where Bedard, I think, needs to take the biggest step is in the speed department, Blackhawks fans, and I was super happy to hear him in himself say this during his exit interview, to have that recognition that that's where he's got to help take his game to the next level. And he pointed out that he's never going to be Nathan McKinnon. He's never going to be Connor McDavid with the skates, but he definitely knows there's room to improve. And still being a 19-year-old kid, you can still develop your skating mechanics. And I honestly think that needs to be priority number one for Connor Bedard this summer. Because with the way the NHL is going, it's just faster than ever. And if you have pace, you have upside. And right now, what's hindering Connor Bedard a little bit is he doesn't have that same game-changing speed that some of these other prospects or some of these other high-level players have. He does have the creativity, he does have the mindset and the athleticism to get away with it, right? Like his recognition and his creativity, his hockey IQ is how he makes these savvy plays happen, but it's not really because of his speed. And while, again, I don't think he's ever going to be the highest level skater, he's only 19 and he can definitely still get better in that aspect. And I think he kind of has to help take his game to the next level and be a 100-point guy in the NHL. And with Connor Bedard's work ethic, I will say I firmly believe that is possible. Also, just in general, 5-on-5 play, being more productive at even strength, right? To only have 12 even strength goals in 82 games. I know you're only 19 and didn't have a lot to work with, Bedsy, but that's a pretty underwhelming number, especially for the shot that you have. And again, I think shot selection and placing it in different spots, creating different angles will help him be a better 5-on-5 goal scorer, and having more help will help him be a better 5-on-5 playmaker. Faceoffs and defense are the other two things that Bedard really needs to work on this summer. I think his defense will continue to get better as he gets more experience, gets older, builds out his frame a little bit more, truly becomes a man. But it's time for him to buck up in the faceoff department, man. If you want to be a top line center for this Blackhawks squad, you got to be able to win 40-45% of your draws at the very least, right? And for him to be under 40% in back-to-back years, he's still a teenager, but it is something that's a little bit concerning. Definitely needs some work with Yannick Perreault in the dot here this summer. But altogether, keeping everything in perspective, the season totals, the leading scorer for the Blackhawks as a 19-year-old, I believe just something teenager to record back-to-back 60-point campaigns in NHL history. Like, honestly, while there are some criticisms to throw his way, we should not be discouraged about Connor Bedard whatsoever. And my comp for Connor Bedard, Blackhawks fans, through his first two seasons, he's Patrick Kane. Like, he's pretty close to Patrick Kane. And while we would have liked to see the goal scoring be a little bit more than what we saw out of Patrick Kane in his first 2 years, the numbers are very, very similar. And I'm encouraged, again, because of the goal scoring upside that Bedard has. I know what he's capable of in that category, and to see the assists and the playmaking really be the driving force of his offensive production the first 2 years definitely has me encouraged as the Blackhawks hopefully take that next step in their rebuild here this summer. I think Patrick Kane is a pretty good comp for Connor Bedard, right? An undersized, offensive-minded player. The only difference is Bedard comes in as a center while Patrick Kane comes in as a wing. But don't forget, the Blackhawks did try out Patrick Kane at the center ice position for one season in particular. But I think there's a lot of similarities between their two games. And what's funny is, while there have been some criticisms thrown Connor Bedard's way, and even I threw him some criticisms, right? There wasn't really all that much criticism going towards Patrick Kane after his first two NHL campaigns. And Connor Bedard's numbers from his first two seasons are pretty darn close to what we saw Patrick Kane put up a little over a decade ago. So putting everything into consideration, Blackhawks fans, I'm going to give Connor Bedard a flat B for his performance this season. I was thinking of going with the B+, but I think a B is a fair grade. He didn't shine and exceed expectations like we expected enough for him to get an A, but it also wasn't a disappointing or discouraging type of season, other than maybe the goal scoring not being where it was. But again, a lot ties into that, Blackhawks fans. So I'm still going to give Connor Bedard a B for his performance during his sophomore season. Let me know in the comment section what you think about that. Do you think the B is spot on, too high, too low? Make sure to let me know and give me your recommendation on who I should be covering next in my Chicago Blackhawks season recaps. But there is Connor Bedard's 24-25 season recap coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans. I'll break down the Rockford IceHogs Game 1 win over the Chicago Wolves. But first, I need to talk to you all real quick about the fine folks over at FanDuel. The NBA playoffs are now underway, and FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action. Right now, when you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you'll get awarded with $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. And that's $250 that you can use to bet on everything from buzzer beaters to early round upsets and even who's going to be lifting the trophy when it's all said and done. Plus, after the game tips off, you can still combine live props into a same game parlay for a chance to win real big. So don't miss out on this incredible offer. Again, it's $250 worth of bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. All you got to do is go and check out FanDuel.com and claim your $250 worth of bonus bets today. Segment 2, the Rockford IceHogs get the job done on the road in Game 1 of their best-of-3 play-in series against the Chicago Wolves, coming away with a nice 2-1 overtime win in Rosemont. And now they just need one win over the final 2 games of this best-of-3 play-in series to move on to the first round against the Milwaukee Admirals. Game 2, by the way, of this series will be back at the BMO Center in Rockford. And I meant to put this up right in front of me when going through this segment, but I know a couple of weeks ago there was an announcement because of scheduling issues with Allstate Arena in Rosemont. The Ice Hogs will actually be hosting games 2 and 3, if necessary, in this series at the BMO Center, despite being the 5th seed, the lower seeded team in this best-of-3 play-in series. The Wolves, the 4 seed, should have 2 games on home ice, but that doesn't look like it's gonna be the case here now. Not exactly sure what the scheduling conflict was with Allstate Arena, but they, as a Chicago suburb resident, there's always busy stuff going on over at Allstate Arena, but nice little advantage for the Ice Hogs that we'll definitely take. And now an even better advantage for the Ice Hogs as they have a 1-0 series lead. And how about the young kids on the back end shining in the moment to get the job done? Kevin Korchinski with the lone goal in regulation for the Ice Hogs to tie this game up at 1-1. And all of these young defensemen, by the way, I talked about how they're going to get an incredible opportunity here in the Stanley Cup playoffs, in the Calder Cup playoffs, to play high leverage situations, even if it is in the AHL, to get kind of your feet wet in those types of situations, high pressure moments, win or go home atmosphere, right? It's noteworthy stuff for young kids. Also, I don't think I put enough weight into how big it is for them to get experience in the NHL late in the season and then come back down to Rockford in order to kind of take what they learned there and put it all into play at a little bit of a lesser level, right? It was awesome to see the young kids thrive, and they all got massive opportunities on the back end right out of the gate. Kevin Korchinski, 24 minutes and 28 seconds of time on ice to go along with the game-tying goal that helped get this game into overtime. And then the 2024 second overall pick, the Artie Party, was on full display in OT as he was the man to net the overtime winner. He led the Ice Hogs as well with 26 minutes and 40 seconds of time on ice. So a lot of great experience for Artyom Levshunov last night. Ethan Del Mastro playing on the top pairing with Korchinski in his offhand side on the right side as a lefty, played 23 minutes and 49 seconds of time on ice. And even Aiden Thompson, who joined on with Rockford late in the year after Denver got knocked out of the NCAA tournament, he played 23 minutes and 16 seconds while skating on the third line. So clearly the Ice Hogs, while they are in win or go home type of mode here, they're still giving their young players a lot of opportunities, and I love to see that in the Calder Cup playoffs. Should mention, though, Marek Vanacker did not get into the Ice Hogs lineup here in Game 1. I do think, though, with the way they've been giving youngsters opportunities here, I know it's a huge step up for Vanacker in competition, and he hasn't been around for too long, but I feel like he should get in for one of these games. Andreas Athanasiou, by the way, also did not suit up for the Ice Hogs in Game 1. Hopefully he'll be healthy enough to go for Game 2. The real number one star of the game, though, Blackhawks fans, for this Ice Hogs win, wasn't Artyom Levshunov with the OT winner, wasn't Kevin Korchinski with the lone goal in regulation. It was Drew Commeso, who's really been on an incredible run with Rockford after his first NHL stint and making his NHL debut with the Blackhawks. Really sharp close to his season, and he kept that momentum going here in Game 1, stopping 32 of the 33 shots that he faced. I love to see the youngsters rising to the occasion here in the biggest moments of the season for the Ice Hogs. Komeso, the number one star. Levshunov with the OT winner. KK fine in the back of the net. Del Mastro, Aiden Thompson getting huge opportunities. We'll see if Merrick Van Acker can wind up drawing into the lineup here for game 2. We'll also see if Colton Dock works his way into the lineup as well, as the Blackhawks officially assigned Dock to Rockford yesterday. For those of you who don't remember, Dock was up in the NHL with the Blackhawks there late in the year, as all the notable prospects seemingly were. And unfortunately, he suffered an elbow injury back on March 30th that put a close to his season up in the NHL. But with the Ice Hogs reassigning him to Rockford yesterday, sure makes it seem like Doc is at least getting close enough to return from that elbow injury. Not guaranteed that it's going to happen here in game 2, but feels like it's going to be happening sooner rather than later. So fun to watch these Rockford IceHogs, and a lot of players who were hopeful are going to be puzzle pieces here in Chicago get an opportunity to play and thrive here in the Calder Cup playoffs. Big game 2 coming up here tonight back at the BMO as the Ice Hogs look to move on to the first round of the Calder Cup playoffs against Milwaukee. Coming up in just a moment here, Blackhawks fans, before I wrap up today's show, I'm going to take a look back at the bold predictions that I dished out from just before the start of the 24-25 season. First, though, I need to talk to you all quickly about the fine folks over at Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go? Between dining out, online shopping, entertainment, it's super easy to lose track. But that's where Monarch Money comes in. And Monarch isn't just a budgeting app. It's your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and complete control over your finances. It's a complete financial command center so that you can track all of your accounts, investments, and spending all in one place, and you can stop just managing your money and start building wealth. And what I personally love about Monarch is that instead of juggling multiple financial apps at the same time, you can just use Monarch to go and check your finances, track your spending, and even plan your long-term goals. So go and take advantage of this offer right now and take control of your finances with Monarch Money by using the code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps at monarchmoney.com, and you'll get 50% off on your first year. Again, that's monarchmoney.com with our code LOCKEDONNHL in all caps for half off on your first year. Back here on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, everyone, for making Locked On Blackhawks your very first listen. Now, for your second listen of the day, make sure to go and check out the new Locked On NHL Game Night. Every game, every night, up until a Stanley Cup champion is crowned. Get local analysis on a national scale with Locked On NHL Game Night, which you can find right now on YouTube or wherever you may be listening to your podcasts. Segment 3, like I did back at the midway point of the 24-25 season, to close things out on the show here today, I wanted to go and take a look back at my bold predictions that I gave from way back in September at the start of the year and see how they ended up playing out as the season has officially come to a close. My number one bold prediction, Blackhawks fans, was that the Hawks will not finish last in the Central Division, and I actually believed that was going to be Utah. Well, Blackhawks were dead last in the Central. Once again, wound up being wrong on that one. However, Utah still was in the bottom 3. I thought it was going to be the Hawks and Utah neck and neck for that bottom spot. Did not anticipate the Nashville Predators with the offseason that they had. I think most people called them the winners of the offseason. They wound up being the third worst team in all of hockey. My second bold prediction that I gave out was that the Blackhawks were going to reach 70 points for the first time since 2019-20, and they will win 30-plus games. That obviously didn't happen, Blackhawks fans. They only won 25 and finished with 61 points, so not close. I said the Blackhawks were going to go under 73.5 points in their projected season point totals from FanDuel, but I thought they were going to be right around 70 to 71. Did not go as planned. I thought the veteran roster they were bringing in here this summer would lead to more progression in the standings. My third bold prediction might be the funniest one of them all. I predicted that Laurent Brossoit was going to become the number one goaltender of the Blackhawks. We didn't even see him for a single game, and I honestly don't know if we saw him for a single practice. The guy was an absolute ghost, so just a hilarious bold prediction from yours truly that couldn't have been more wrong. Next one was Pat Maroon becomes the new unlikely Blackhawks fan favorite. I expected that to be more of a thing because I thought the Blackhawks were going to be winning more games this year. Because they didn't, and because they also weren't on TV, Pat Maroon being a new fan favorite didn't really gain as much traction as I thought it would. In like the tight-knit Blackhawks community on social media, I think we all enjoyed Pat Maroon's addition and being a veteran presence, a good guy in the locker room, and it was cool to have him in his final NHL season, but I truly don't think he became that next fan favorite like I imagined him being because of all those things that I just outlined. Not a horrible bold prediction from yours truly, though. Next was Alex Vlasic takes over as the legit number one defenseman. Seth might beat him in minutes, but we'll know who's the true number one after this year. Definitely was the case earlier on in the season. Alex Vlasic's first half was incredible. Second half seemed like he got wore down a little bit, having to take on true number one ice time after Seth Jones was dealt. I think kind of wore on him a little bit, but I still feel very confident that Alex Vlasic is going to be a top pairing defenseman of the future for the Blackhawks. So was kind of on the money with that one. My next one was Ethan Del Mastro earns a call-up and stays. I was pretty on the money with this one, Blackhawks fans. I definitely think he would have stayed on through the end of the season had the Hawks not had just a slew of young defensemen they were trying to get opportunities to, right? And with Levshunov and Rinzel being there was not the certainty that Del Mastro was going to get, consistent time night in and night out at the NHL. So you might as well send him back down to Rockford where he can ramp up for the Calder Cup playoffs. But I think Ethan Del Mastro cemented himself as an NHLer moving into next season. He's obviously going to have to follow that up with a good training camp, but I definitely think he's a guy. Number 7 for me was Andreas Athanasiou doesn't get traded. Well, that wound up being true, but not for the reasons we thought. It was because he was injured and he wasn't really worth it. I thought he wasn't going to get traded because his speed was going to be helpful for the Blackhawks. They definitely could have used his speed under Luke Richardson. Unfortunately, he was injured and didn't play all that consistently earlier on in the season. Didn't expect for him to play with the Ice Hogs, though. Thought he'd remain with the Blackhawks through the end of the season. Number 8, my bold prediction was that Artyom Levshunov doesn't get called up until March or April. Wound up being true. Gotta let the boy develop. Was on the money in that one. Was also on the money with this one. Lukas Reichel doesn't figure it out. But if you remember, when listing this as my bold prediction, there was reasoning behind it. And it wasn't solely because Reichel wasn't able to piece it together in the NHL. It was because of outside influences, Luke Richardson not using him in the right manner. Same thing happened with Anders Sorensen. Wound up being pretty true. Lukas Reichel still hasn't figured it out, but I don't fully believe it's all his fault. Number 10, my last one that I gave out was Ryan Green makes his NHL debut and scores his first NHL goal. Obviously, we didn't see Greener pot that first NHL tuck. Would have been awesome for that to be the case. I was on the money with a couple of these. A few I was way off on, but hey, that's the point of bold predictions. You're throwing wacky things out there, seeing what will stick, and I'll definitely be doing it again for the 25-26 season. But that's going to take care of today's episode of Locked On Blackhawks, everyone. As always, thank you all again for joining me on the show. Be sure to go and subscribe to Locked On Blackhawks on YouTube. Follow Locked On Blackhawks wherever you may be listening to your podcast. That way, you can get the latest episode as soon as it becomes available each and every day. Till the next episode, everyone, enjoy the rest of your weekends. I'll see you next time on the Locked On Blackhawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.